Greetings, Morehouse College community. Welcome to our standard tradition, our annual Otis Moss Oratorical Contest. I too am pleased that it is being held in historic Sale Hall Chapel. So we will hear echoes from the past and voices of the future from our contestants. Today's prompt was really given by Otis Moss Jr. himself. So it is very special. And on your program, you will see that the students will speak about love, justice, and reconciliation. This prompt, as I said, came from Otis Moss Jr. himself this year. Usually, we prepare that in the English department, and my colleague Felicia Stewart and I give the prompts to the students. But his direct involvement this time is very important. And he will be here again in April to have a dialogue, so stay tuned for more. Let this be the prelude to the messages that he will impart. So without further ado, I'll introduce my colleague Felicia Stewart, Director of Communication, who will manage the rest of this following the prayer by Shaquille Moore, who was the winner of our 2015 Otis Moss contest.
Good morning. Please pause, close your eyes, and join me for a moment of meditation, prayer, and reflection. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. The sages of old offer words which transcend space and time. Howard Thurman, one of those sages, offers this admonition: Morehouse, do not make God repent for having made thee. To elucidate, Morehouse, do not reject your own. Morehouse, do not conflate the appearance for reality. Could it be, Morehouse, that the very people who we reject on this campus are actually the individuals needed to resurrect the essence of the Morehouse man? Could it be that those who are not allowed to live their truth on this campus are actually those who are needed to recognize the humanity of the Morehouse man? Could it be that those who we fail to affirm due to differences in orientation, background, and establishment politics are actually those who are needed to resurrect the notion of true brotherhood that comes with being a student at this institution? Could it be that those who seem to be the antithesis of the Morehouse man are needed to make him whole again? My brothers, we cannot live in the appearance of the Morehouse man or the mission of this institution. We must live in the reality of Morehouse, our personal truth, and the mission of this bastion of hope for black men. Lest it be said, they came to that which was their own, but their own did not receive them. Amen.
Good morning. You may notice that this year we have a few more names on the finalist list than we have had in years past. And before I introduce them, allow me to introduce our judges. I like to call them our creme de la creme veteran judges extraordinaire. And we thank them in advance for the task that is before them. We have with us Dean Alvin Darden, Mr. Henry Goodgame Jr., Mr. Kenneth L. Newby, Esquire, all of whom are Morehouse men, and our other fabulous judges are Dr. Keisha Tassie and Mrs. Carolyn Walker. Our timekeepers this year are freshman student Jyron Isaac and Senior Mr. C. Carter Poston. The finalists will present in the order that you see on your program, and they are Mr. Jalon Alexander, Mr. Keith Asbury, Mr. Tyler Deron Baker, Mr. Alexander J. Barron, Mr. Shahid Brooks, Mr. William Coggins, Mr. Caleb Henderson, Mr. Deron Marble, Mr. Jalen R. Smith, Mr. Blake Stoner, and Mr. Thomas Weaver. Without further ado, let the 2016 Otis Moss Jr. Oratorical Contest begin.
My name is Jalon Alexander, sophomore history major at Morehouse College. From June to July of 2015, I worked part-time as a recreational aide at a summer camp back at home in Chesapeake, Virginia. I supervised the children regardless of complexion. There would be moments the kids would ask me, "Mr. Jalon, will you play with us? Mr. Jalon, look what I drew. Mr. Jalon, you're an awesome person." All the comments and questions always made me smile just how much I inspired them. Yet what bothers me the most is that once these children become adults and realize what the real world is like, they start hating each other because of their differences in complexion. This causes a horrendous wound that will not be able to heal. My brothers, we must ask ourselves, how can we eliminate what I call the two evils of society, which are hatred and injustice, and fulfill the promise where we love each other through the achievement of justice in order to reconcile with each other? We live in a society where hatred and injustice continues to destroy our hope for a better world. We live in a time where greed destroys wisdom. Corruption continues to thrive. We say we love our brothers and sisters, but some of them turn their back on us. We have our brother with a lighter skin complexion than us, perpetuating degradation on the basis of race. The only way to combat this monstrosity is to have programs that follow a restorative justice model explained by Fania Davis from her article, "This Country Needs a Truth and Reconciliation Process Against African Americans Right Now." She states that a restorative justice model means that youth, families, and communities directly affected by the killings, along with allies, would partner with the federal government to establish a commission. This is crucial in order to achieve reconciliation along with love and justice. What is also imperative for reconciliation to happen is that we have to move toward a reconciled America. We have to do ourselves. Reconciliation is an ongoing and collective process. We must roll up our sleeves and do the messy, challenging, but hopeful work of creating transformed relationships and structures leading us into new futures, as stated by Fania Davis. Only this will resolve the resentment we have towards each other in order to have positive and healthy relationships we have towards each other in order to have that it will prosper. And it is what Kendrick Lamar would say from Walter Man, Nelson-like. We, as a black community, must understand the importance of love, justice, and reconciliation as not only just a tool to heal and learn to forgive each other, but as a weapon. To break these chains to set yourself free. Break these chains and to set your brothers and sisters free. Break these chains to set your family and friends free. Break these chains of injustice and oppression. Break these chains of war and destruction. Break these chains to stop the violence and negotiate peace and love on who you meet. Break these chains which binds us from one form of slavery to the next. This, my brothers, must be done to set yourself free from the two evils of society, hatred and injustice. We must learn to let love, justice, and reconciliation flow through us. The world can be a better place if we learn to let love guide us to the righteous path that God wants us to be on. We must come together as brothers and finally ask ourselves two important questions. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Second, do you want our dreams of a better world for our next generation to become a reality? Or do we want to continue living in a nightmare ruled by the two evils of society? If the time is always right to do the right thing, we must combat these atrocities now. It is our choice, our fate. So my brothers, let's choose the right one, lest we remain enslaved by society. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Keith Alexander Asbury II, a junior philosophy major, French minor from Chesapeake, Virginia. America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves, President Abraham Lincoln. Certainly, my brothers and sisters, we are at war with ourselves. The reality of our humanity is that we are remnants of a vessel torn between the heart and the mind. For where the heart calls us to love, the mind calls us to seek truth and justice. Blind to their intersectionality, we have divorced the two, as it so seems that the origins of weakness arise when we give in to the desires of our heart and mind. We have been sold a false dream. A dream that would suggest that our strength comes from our ability to sacrifice love and justice so that we might go where few are willing in order to get what is ours. If we continue to subject ourselves to this way of thinking, Black America will either find itself mourning the loss of another brother or sister, or it will have committed social suicide in its inability to reconcile itself to its own truth. For centuries, we have fought to be alive. Many of our ancestors fought fiercely against being forcibly removed from their native land, while others fought for our humanity to be recognized during the abolitionist and civil rights movement. We have seemingly tread from the far reaches of the earth and back, fighting for a place here in this world, and yet very few Black men and women have taken the plight towards coming to terms with their own truth. We have taken upon ourselves the prideful truths of prejudice and injustice, placing ourselves in a position to be physically, spiritually, and socially destroyed. If we continue to go along this path, then we will fail, my brothers and sisters. It is time that we return back to those fundamental truths of love and justice necessary for our healing and our unification to take place. Reverend Otis Moss Jr. once said, "The love without justice is weak sentimentality. Justice without love is naked brutality, and without the two there can be no reconciliation." We often ask ourselves, how is it that in such a time as this, hate and injustice seem to be at every flick and click of a screen? Simply put, American culture has made itself too inward-looking. We cannot continue to love ourselves so much that we loathe those who are not mirror images of what we seek to have affirmed in our own being. When we deny justice to those who identify differently than ourselves, we are no better than the latest police officer charged to protect our lives, but resorted to taking one instead. Justice, which acts out of hate or fear, has become an all too familiar sight in our society today. To have justice without love is to have no means of acquiring the morality of which we seek. Just as it is love that liberates us holistically to each other, justice frees us to receive such moral truth without perverting it for selfish gains. Now comes the time that we understand that we are strengthened when we allow our heart and our mind to operate as one. Now comes the time that we understand that when we free our minds from oppressive regimes which attribute inferiority on the basis of race, gender, and sexuality, we then free our hearts. We free our hearts to love ourselves and others better, a necessary means of reconciling our community to stand up against oppression everywhere. For if we remain ignorant and fail to stand together, just as in Martin Niemöller's poem, we too may be left alone. Alas, and when we close our eyes and take that last breath, we will have realized that the true enemy was never out there, but that it existed within ourselves. Thank you.
My name is Tyler Baker. I'm a freshman, undeclared major from Indianapolis, Indiana. I had a dream. I had a dream that I had the honor of meeting Dr. King on a warm summer day. I couldn't believe my eyes as Dr. King admired the portraits of leaders in his very own chapel. As I gathered my thoughts in a fumble, I spoke with him. We talked about all of his experiences from his childhood to his marriage to the civil rights fight. Then I figured that he'd be interested in the current affairs of today, so I spoke my mind. I began on how we as a people continue to fight stereotypes, taking momentous leaps forward, but negative steps backward. We're coming closer to unity, but we still continue to give ourselves bad representations. We spit hate and speak death to those around us. We promote dysfunctional families, and we literally kill ourselves. It's as if our senses have become deadened as our collective self-worth equates to nothingness. Systematic racism works against our communities also, and slavery in many forms is alive and well. Unfit police officers can and do cut down whom they choose. We've lost our purpose and we don't know where to go. We erroneously exercise ignorant audacity as we dismiss every opportunity we've been given as a result of strong-willed individuals of all colors. We are too consumed with our daily lives and we neglect what we deem unimportant. It's as if the freedom fighters of old passed the torch on to our generation and we dropped it. So, all this to say, Dr. King, how does it feel to know that you've made so much progress only to see it abused? He then looked away from the paintings and looked me square in the eyes. He said, "Son, I understand how easy it is to have such a pessimistic outlook. We're all broken and we need grace for our faults. You are correct when you mention everything from the systematic racism to the police brutality. Yes, Tyler, I understand the issues that your fellow brothers and sisters face. I, myself, still grieve for our society. But young man, hear me. You have already failed if you don't recognize that you yourself are just as guilty as those who you mentioned above. You are Timothy Loman, you are Milliam and Roy Bryant, and you are George Zimmerman. Your sin is no better than theirs. But remember the cross. It's only here where our wounds will be healed and we'll learn to forgive, just like Christ. Christ died for you, Christ died for you, Christ died for you, Christ died for me. Christ died for the father who abandoned his family, the murderer, the prostitute, and the thief alike. So don't you ever think that your good deeds, your status, your job title, or your GPA will ever overlook your sin. Rather, hold fast to hope. You have the now, and you possess the power to be a positive impact that will last for ages. Love must come first before justice, reconciliation, and rectification can be realized. Use your influence wisely, and others will follow. Be a leader. Soon, very soon, this madness will come to a close when Christ comes back to right every single wrong. God is still on the throne. As he walked out of the chapel, he faded away, and I woke up. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Alexander Joseph Barron, a junior, International Studies major, Chinese minor, from Atlanta, Georgia. A saint in India observes a vicious quarrel on the banks of the river Ganges. He explains to his disciples when people become angry, their hearts grow apart. This distance causes them to raise their voices. Their hearts are trying to hear each other. Otis Moss posited that both love and justice are necessary to the path of reconciliation. Just like the two wings of a bird, love and justice are necessary. Reconciliation requires that each wing be equally strong. Hurston was right. Love is the force which compels the soul from its hiding place. King was right. Justice is the end to which the long moral arc of the universe bends. The Buddha was right. Three things cannot be hidden long: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Therefore, I am syllogistically right. Reconciliation is nothing short of divine settlement made manifest. God's will being done in earth as it is in heaven, and a messy process, for it requires us to see an unseeable future where love is complemented by the institutions of justice. The quarrel is the distance between where we are and where we desire to be, the distance between hearts, the distance between socioeconomic statuses, the distance between colors of skin, the distance between theologies, the distance between displays of heteronormative performance, the distance. This is the very distance that bruised Baldwin, tormented Tubman, killed King, and crucified Christ. In 2016, black people often misunderstand turn the other cheek as a denial of agency. We have forgiven ourselves for being beat by slave master, but we have not forgiven ourselves for being captured. Many African Americans have grown dangerously complacent in Master's house, having become so thoroughly integrated. Some of us have turned a blind eye to the throngs of black bodies who still suffer under the lash of poverty, miseducation, and poor health. Lest we forget, the distance between Master's house and the fields is very short. My charge today is simple. We must love ourselves enough to pick up the hammer of industry and the nails of economic cohesion and build a new house, a Morehouse, which has more love, more compassion, more equity, more justice, more integrity, more efficiency, more dignity, by handcrafting pillars of liberty so that all, not some, may find respite in our house. In our Morehouse, district attorneys do not shield structural savagery from the people's justice. Minimum wage is a living wage at $10 an hour. City Hall sings songs of the democratic system, not buckle to the cacophonous tune of apathy. And this mighty and divinely appointed republic will stand as a moral and military stalwart, bringing distant lands long afflicted by the cancers of despotism and religious radicalism under control. Perhaps it is the naivete of youth which underpins my hope, but America, like Noah's Ark, is diverse and burgeoning with life. And though the troubled waters of the great flood of racial tension have begun to ram into the doors of this ark, and the boat is tossed on waves of uncertainty, I know that this bountiful nation, this ark, is closing the distance between human hearts, racing towards a mountaintop where all miseries are reconciled. I'll tell you, like the ancestors used to sing, oh, the old ox are moving, moving, moving. The old ox are moving and I'm going home. The old ox, she reeled and the old ox, she rocked. The old ox, she landed on the mountaintop. Oh, the old ox, she's a moving, moving, moving. The old ox are moving and we are going home.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shahid Brooks. I am a freshman major from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Imagine a black screen as we fade in on a mountaintop. The sky is a warm, resplendent blue, and the wide view elicits a feeling of freedom. It's all so surreal. Then we cut to screen black as eyelids lift to reveal a ceiling encased in mold and dirt. Suddenly, the camera turns left to reveal bars, and we realize that it was all a dream. We realize that there was never any freedom because instead of standing on a mountaintop, we're actually inside of a prison cell. Such is the reality of millions of Black Americans disproportionately marginalized by criminal legislation and procedure, forced to live a nightmare. When offenders are actually released from prison, they are all but forced to return, because on the outside there are no proper mechanisms to reconcile them and reintegrate them into the society that they have offended. So they return to prison, where at least there's a place to sleep, where at least there's food to eat. Thus, they are imprisoned. What we understand in our criminal justice system today is that it is solely retributive, based on conceptions of retribution that date back to ancient conceptions of justice found in the Old Testament, the Code of Hammurabi, and best expressed by the words of Oedipus Rex, who once said, "How am I wrong if all I did was return a blow?" You see, with vengeance in mind, we have the tendency to punish and ostracize instead of educating, counseling, and embracing. And thus, our criminal justice system has become a whirlpool of despair, a psychologically bending chasm into which men can enter, but rarely can they escape. And you see, this forms the foundation of how justice implements itself in our society. This forms the foundation of centuries of intrusive, institutional, and generationally pervasive marginalization. Marginalization that leads to broken communities and thus broken homes and thus broken people. And what we understand is that the longer we focus on retribution, the longer justice is withheld, based on this notion of inherent criminality, which leads jurors to automatically assume that if someone is being tried, then they must have done something wrong. And so we outcast them and subconsciously place our faith in this idea, in this system that fails to recognize who they have actually imprisoned. I believe that James Baldwin was correct when he once asserted that ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy that justice can have. And with these words, he tells us to stand in solidarity, to stand in anger, yes, but to also stand in love. Let us push for rehabilitative reform in the criminal justice process, community-based reconciliation efforts to help offenders reintegrate back into society, and the erosion of blacklisting for nonviolent offenders. We cannot simply fight for those who are already gone, but we must fight for those who are still alive. Having life cannot matter more than the quality of life one has while living. Justice, I believe, is the culmination of its sum, its ability to provide balance, but without equal retributive and restorative efforts, balance can never be achieved. And justice will remain a tenet of surrealistic idealism, the stuff dreams are made of. What we understand is that we must be nurturers. Along with the sword, we must present the olive branch, for retribution may be an effective option, but it cannot be the sole option. We must be nurturers, leaders, enforcers, and repairers, deontologically bound to those on the edge of tragedy, on the precipice of a nightmare. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. How are you? My name is William Coggins. I am a sophomore computer science major from Charles County, Maryland. What a sad state of affairs is the African American in. Although we are in a new year, society operates much too similar like it did 60 years ago. A revival of contrarian, anti-diversity rhetoric has emerged, stemming from the increasingly publicized events dealing with African Americans and the state, and on this occasion, the police. Those who manage to survive the genocide of the prison industrial complex are left aloof from society, bearing the double consciousness that Du Bois states oh so often, denoting the mind in which we operate in when dealing with the world, and likewise having the ability to view the world like an outsider looking through a window. There are a few questions, however, whose solutions may lead us to build a better community. Firstly, how can the African American successfully reconcile what society perceives him to be versus the reality he pushes to pursue? Secondly, from where can one receive love if the world reviles your existence? Lastly, when the state has failed to do its job, who then becomes the arbiter of justice? We are each familiar with the monolithic image that society paints of African Americans. It is one that strips us of our individual experiences. It is one that slaps our triumphs in the face. And lastly, it subverts us from actualizing our immense potential. The constant viral videos, the constant crime alerts, the constant daily episodes of Maury paint pale images of the daily life of the African American. When they recognize the achievements of one of us, however, something interesting happens. You become an outlier. At the point at which acting white is necessarily acting intellectual, there is an interesting dichotomy that emerges. A young Afro-headed black man has a choice to make. Either he can choose to be black and engage in said anti-intellectual behavior, or allow his own natural brilliance to dim under the shadow of doubt in himself. This dichotomy has the potential to swallow many young African American men and women whole, constantly questioning their fidelity to their race, and as such, dismantling them from an important layer of their identity forged by ancestors past. The only solution, then, seems clear enough. We have to be confident in ourselves and be able to love ourselves. You are not here on this earth for anyone else's approval, but yours and the Lord's, and as such, have to operate outside where these terms don't affect you. Once that is achieved, we can find the true arbiter of justice. The reality of our present time is that our state has failed us. Justice has removed her blindfold and has likely and does profile black and brown bodies to incarcerate and to murder. The question becomes, what then is the obligation of the citizen, namely the black community? As Louis Farrakhan had stated some 20 years ago, we must be the ones to uphold each other. For while outside of the control of the state, while the authorities are shooting our brothers and sisters who are minorities, several more happen between each other on a daily basis. This divisive environment only plays more to the state, giving them justification to act in such a harsh manner to African Americans. Before we can solve these core issues, though, there lies a special hole forged deep within our hearts, formed over 300 years of oppression that must be filled through some means. In a world that reviles and rejects us, we can only find a solution to fill our hearts through loving ourselves. Through said self-love and appreciation, we will push past the images of the media, become confident in ourselves, and as a result, learn to build a community that the state has failed to create.
My name is Caleb E.L. Henderson. I am a junior political science major, economics minor from Kansas City, Kansas. Man must create for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. These words passed from the lips of the great Reverend Dr. King on a cold December night in Oslo as he accepted his Nobel Peace Prize. Unbeknown to him, these words would transcend the causes for which he stood and would even transcend the entirety of his life to become the moral standard by which all people should evaluate themselves. Conflict is one of the few things we are guaranteed during our human experience. From the dawn of time, wherever there can be found a group of people living in proximity, Conflict is somewhere in the midst. We can trace the strife amongst men from the current times of turmoil in which we live all the way back to the slaughtering of Abel by his brother Cain. Great minds of old, such as Plato, Thomas Hobbes, and Machiavelli, toiled and wrestled with their conceptualization of wrongdoing, appropriate punishment, and the necessary preconditions for reconciliation. Unfortunately for these men, they were not privy to the prescription left to us by the Reverend Otis Moss Jr. Equal parts of love and justice are the only means to achieving authentic reconciliation. In accordance with our calling to be global citizens, we must always remain committed to our commitment to justice. Under no circumstances should we fail to advocate for those who have been mistreated and downtrodden. Pursuing justice, my young brothers, is not always easy, and it is not always popular. Pursuing justice will require you to do what is right even when every influence around you is encouraging you to participate in wrong. Pursuing justice will mean accepting the fact that all actions have consequences and repercussions. Justice is often bitter and righteousness is seldom glamorous, but they are our duty as responsible citizens. We have a duty to speak against the evil that continues to pervade our society. It is our moral obligation. We have a moral obligation to stand against the homophobia and heteronormativity that continues to run through our community. We have a moral obligation to stand against the water crisis that has crippled our brothers and sisters in Flint, Michigan. We have a moral obligation to stand against the unlawful killing of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald, who was shot 16 times in the cold streets of Chicago. You see, we should never fail to advocate for those who cannot do so for themselves. In our quest for justice, however, we cannot forget to implement love. Love must be the underpinning of everything that we do. For though we speak with the tongues of men and angels, if we have not love, it profit us nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not boast, it is not proud, and it does not gun down unarmed citizens. If our pursuit of justice is not coated with the sweet authenticity of love, then it is in vain. We seek justice not out of ill intent or retaliatory spirit, but rather from a place of love, understanding that he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. The conjunction of these two elements, justice and love, are the only means to achieving reconciliation. We must carry these two with us in all contexts. And as we press forward in our struggle for justice, let us never forget that love is the universal language we have all been called to speak. Thank you for your time.
My name is Duran Marble, a sophomore philosophy and music double major from Indianapolis, Indiana. In this nation, justice and love are two meandering strangers that have never seen each other's faces. I have 4 minutes total behind this podium to expand and expound on these two concepts that might require a little more time. I don't have that much time, but if there was more time, I might tell you about love, the force that might perhaps be what holds the stars in the firmament, but I only have 4 minutes. If time would ever be so kind, I might suggest that justice never walks in uninvited, but I only have 4 minutes. If time would smile down on this chapel, I might tell you that this nation has kept Lady Justice off the guest list for a little too long now, but I only have 4 minutes. If time would be my friend, I might remind you that America is big, she is vast, she is the world's superpower, but what if her size and influence of justice doesn't abound on her own soil, but I only have 4 minutes? Well, if time might lend its hand, I might say that America's promise isn't dead. It does, however, gasp for the reconciling air of justice and thirst for the reconciling restorative water of love. If there was time, I might lend a few seconds that submit that if Lady Justice is truly blind, She has somehow, in miraculous feats of thaumaturgy, developed the capacity to hear color, but I only have 4 minutes. If time would have a little patience, I might direct your attention to Tamir Rice's body in the park where he had been nailed to the fiery cross of state-sanctioned violence, but I only have 4 minutes. If time would allow me to pace myself, I might go on and have you ponder on Sandra Bland or Maya Hall and the countless other black women that we won't march for, but I only have 4 minutes. I might even go on to tell you that love is inherent to justice, and any civic action void of love must never be called justice, but I only have 4 minutes. If time would stop and every clock in this world would bow in obedience, if time would be on my side, I might proclaim that we find ourselves in the midnight hour. In this hour, we face a justice system that primarily feeds on black and brown flesh. And in this hour, we witness an economy that keeps the poor poor, refusing to make the good news a reality. We feel a degraded environment that destroys the good earth and the good life. And in this hour, we cultivate a heteronormativity that seeks to trap queer and gender nonconforming folks, but I only have 4 minutes. We find ourselves in this midnight hour, but when the morning hour comes and truth awakens for her morning cup of coffee, and the darkness of dusk begins to make way for the dawn, and the same spirit that summoned Sojourner and made Malcolm and hailed Harriet and begged Baldwin and called King prevails, we might see the law be crafted in a way that affirms black life and not black plight and black pain and black suffering, that legislative bodies will respond to the calls for police officers to be held to a higher standard, that while CEOs that make $5 million, $15 million, $10 million in profit, their workers not be left with the crumbs that fall off the table. I would be so careful to remind you that just as I don't have that much time behind this podium, we don't have that much time. For if we wait too much longer to make justice a reality, even the rocks will cry out for a new order. Right and wrong can't live in the same house. For if love is right, then police brutality is wrong. If justice is right, then poverty is wrong. If justice is right, then the pay gap is wrong. If love is right, then political apathy and moral hollowness is wrong. If justice is right, then economic stagnation is wrong. If love is right, then the constant search for inoffensive solutionettes is wrong. If justice is right, then the miasma of misogyny is wrong. And if love and justice prove to be wrong, then America must strive to be disgustingly guilty. Thank you.
My name is Jalen Smith, a junior philosophy and mathematics major from Macon, Georgia. Join with me as I peruse your cerebrum cortex and engage with me on this intellectual odyssey. Imagine a place that is solely dedicated to fostering the optimism and the intellectualism of the African-American male, an institution formed as God's response to the ills and evils of the world he created. Down in the red clay dirt below the Mason-Dixon line in gut bucket Jim Crow did God place this creation, and he called this place Morehouse. Morehouse, an institution that assiduously grains into the psyche of her students the Renaissance model. We all know this archetypal Morehouse man, the Renaissance man that dares to grow tall enough to wear the proverbial crown that Mother Morehouse places on her son's head. The man of Morehouse that people can tell, but can't tell much to. The eloquent man of Morehouse that can piece together attractive adjectives and vivacious verbs that are used to express sentences and extrapolate ideas so insightful that men rush to canonize them. The man of Morehouse that dresses, speaks, and writes so well that he commands the attention of everyone in the room without even opening his mouth. The man of Morehouse that the black community at large all wish would permeate the masses. But I do not wish to deal with that man of Morehouse. Today I wish to deal with the other Morehouse. And I use this term because there are literally two Morehouses. One Morehouse is flowing with the milk of propriety and the honey of opulence. That Morehouse is the habitat for over 2,000 men of color who, while basking in the sunlight of opportunity, are imbued with self-assurance, confidence, and a mystique unparalleled in its nature. But as we assemble here today, my brothers, I'm sure that each of us is painfully and acutely aware of the fact that there is indeed another Morehouse. And that Morehouse has a nightly ugliness about it that transformed the buoyancy of hope into the fatigue of despair. In that Morehouse, the men of the lumpen bourgeois have grown a cold, apathetic shoulder to the plight of people who aren't in their spaces. Driven by ruthless ambition, they become well-adjusted to injustice and well-adapted to indifference. You see, my dear brothers, this apathy has inspired us to become more concerned about making a living than making a difference. We've cultivated a space where we are prone to judge success by the index of our salaries rather than by the quality of our service to humanity. It was indeed that messianic Benjamin Elijah Mays, the sixth president of Morehouse, that declared, "I am disturbed, I am uneasy about men," because we have no guarantee that when we train a man's mind, we will train his heart. No guarantee that when we increase a man's knowledge, we will increase his goodness. There is no necessary correlation between knowledge and goodness. Indeed, brethren, at this other Morehouse, if we've learned to extrapolate Plato's apology, but we are filled with apathy, we've no goodness. If we've learned to sing Puccini's arias, but we are deferent to the ubiquity of rape culture on our campus, we've no goodness. If we learn to wrestle with Freud's theories, we've tangled with Shakespeare poetry, electroslided with Marxist analyses, and we've dabbed into the exegesis of biblical texts, but we are apathetic to the powers that be, we've no goodness. I say unto you, brothers, that we cannot demonstrate acuity while maintaining our implicit misogyny. We cannot practice integrity while holding on to our incessant apathy. No, brothers, we cannot exhibit agency and not possess empathy. And I boldly declare without fear or trepidation that we cannot commit to brotherhood while marginalizing our women's sisterhood. How appropriate is this year's theme of love, justice, and reconciliation? It was the great orator and theologian Otis Jr. who declared that love without justice is weak sentimentality. Without the two, there can be no reconciliation, and I'm mighty glad that on this morning, I have someone to emulate who possessed these qualities. You see, over 2,000 years ago, a poor, nappy-headed Palestinian Jew named Jesus had a hypersensitivity to the suffering and plight of others and decided to come and advocate for what he called the least of these. With his love radicalized and his gospel marginalized, he eventually capitulated to death. But I'm glad that like any good black man or black woman, he didn't stay there. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy footstool? Men of Morehouse, love, justice, and reconciliation. This has been our clarion call.
Y'all gonna leave? Come on now. It's all good, it's all good. My name is Blake Stoner. I'm a junior economics major from College Park, Georgia, by the way of Jackson, Mississippi. They say the heart is a symbol of love, but it's more than that. It's an indicator. It tells you about the state of someone. The faster the beat, the more attention you should give it. The heartbeat of America is speeding up. This most commonly happens when there's a type of pressure upon you. There is something about the sympathetic nervous system that puts you in a cautionary state. Fight or flight. That pressure can stem from some type of fear or anxiety. Maybe we're realizing you've done something wrong. With regard to the American Pulse, I would say something similar is happening. The heart of this country aches for togetherness, but has a paralyzing fear concerning how to do it. Now, let's say there's a bakery, and their opening order was to bake a cake for the White House. Now, this is big. Such a cake will set the whole precedence of that entire bakery. So they put all their training into action. They get their baking powder, flour, eggs, and butter, and they make a wonderful batter. A batter so good they knew everyone would love it. They raved about it, and people were excited. After it was decorated, it was simply an exquisite creation. I mean, everybody was in awe. When it was cut and handed out, the bakers could not wait to see the results of their work. However, to their surprise, some of the faces turned sour. Their hearts began to race. It all clicked. They forgot to add sugar to the mix. The bakers began to grow anxious because of their own creation. They didn't know what to do. The same can be said about America. Anxiety is setting in. The sugarless cake is the same as our Constitution, incomplete from its origins. Just like the cake, it was impressive, elegant, but it was missing a key ingredient. From the external perspective, it was fine. It was not until it was tried they realized it was all wrong. Today we can say we've been served a bitter treat. The Constitution, with all its magnificence, was not made for you, my brothers and sisters. See, we are the sugar. Someone might say, well, Stoner, the Constitution was made for all men. Men are born with inalienable rights. Well, this is true. The text does say this for every man. But in 1787, you were 3/5 of that. We were lesser, not even human. This is why the American heartbeat is racing, because Brother King's check he took to D.C. has yet to be cashed. So America has two options: fight or flight. Flight, to continue avoiding the issue, making patches here and there to pacify, but not truly uprooting the problem. Or fight, to do something about it, accepting that we have a moral dilemma. So what am I saying? Could the bakers just sprinkle sugar on top of the cake and solve the problem? No. See, the batter brings all our ingredients together, and a chemical reaction allows them to form bonds and rise. The baking of the cake is a testament to how we should live. The people demanded the bakers to make a new cake. Likewise, we must demand America to make a new constitution. We must understand that togetherness is the heavenly prerequisite to do so much more. But be wary about how you go about this. Toussaint Louverture once said, "It was easy to cut down the tree of liberty, but not so easy to restore it to life." So don't be quick to be at arms or hold contempt. Instead, go in with a mindset of progression. Toussaint also said, "Unite, for combination is stronger than magic." My family, we are faced with problems that require inclusive effort. We have to set the course of the future. We must have a type of evolutionary love that makes for a more just and reconciled nation. We must be one collective force so strong that we compel the world to follow. We must realize our salvation is tied together. So ask yourself, do you really care? Are you willing to try? And will you join me? Thank you.
Oh, for real? Y'all serious? I'm going to say good afternoon, considering the fact that it's now noon. My name is Thomas Weaver. I am a freshman business finance major from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Otis Moss Jr. once said that love without justice is weak sentimentality. Justice without love is naked brutality. And without the two, there can be no reconciliation, which means that the unfair and harsh mistreatment of my brothers in the African American community will continue until the United States fully loves and accepts us, my Morehouse brothers, and the rest of the population of rightful members of this country. Many will completely disagree with the notion that the United States is still indeed discriminatory towards African Americans. For example, Kate Powledge, a writer for The Hill and a Fox News contributor, composed a story with the message, "America is not that racist." Powledge continued her viewpoints by stating, although African Americans were not treated properly and forced into slavery when they were brought to this country, America still had the dignity to end slavery and has since moved forward to correct the wrongs with the successes of the civil rights movement, affirmative action, legislation, and pop culture. She continues and says that institutional racism is no longer prevalent, and then continues to say that Obama, elected twice by American voters, is black for a fact. Kate Powledge concludes her article by stating, America isn't a racist country at all. And America is one of the most socially accepting countries in the world. And although as a concerned African-American male, those words would be extremely comforting to believe, but however, the statistics do not lie. A journalist for the Guardian news outlet, John Swain, addressed in our article that young black males are 9 times more likely to be killed by police. He referenced the fact that 1,134 people were killed by United States police officers in the year 2015. And of those 1,134 people, African-American males from the ages of 15 to 34 years old comprised 15 to 20% of those killed, which means that out of every 65 African-American males killed, 4 were killed by police officers in the United States. When the reasons for these murders by police officers were examined, Case Palvage's illogical view of a non-racist society continues to crumble into ruins. For example, police murdered Kajimi Powell, 25-year-old from St. Louis, Missouri, when they said they approached him about a shoplifting. They said Kajimi Powell approached them with a knife. Video evidence proved that claim. The United States police killed another young man by the name of Michael Brown. They claimed that he charged at him, even though ballistics proved that was incorrect. Kay Palvage claimed that the United States is one of the most socially accepting places in the world, but according to statistics of people with dark skin color being killed for no apparent reason, it becomes hard to even believe. Palvage attempted to fight against the notion that the United States did not accept African Americans after describing the effects of the Civil Rights Movement and the laws passed to give some blacks some of their civil liberties. However, she left out the mandatory minimum and drug laws handed out by President Ronald Reagan and his administration that targeted low-income African Americans. According to the organization Families Against Mandatory Minimums, in 2010, 10,694 people were sentenced under these tasted guidelines. And out of the male population, 40% of them were African American males. President Obama, unlike Kate Palvage, is dedicating time to correcting the wrongs of this country. Obama has commuted the sentences of 141 drug offenders, and he has also presented plans to overhaul the prison system for first-time nonviolent offenders. In a speech before the NAACP in 2014, the president said that if you're a low-level drug dealer, you owe some debt to society. You have to be held accountable, and you must make amends, but you do not owe 20 years. You do not owe a life sentence. Through the loveless and criminal justice system and its officials, brutalities have been committed against our race. There are over-imprisonment and unjustified murders. And moreover, the rampant mistreatment of my people has shown that America is in fact sentimentally weak. So as a disenfranchised citizen of the United States, I'm glad there's an attempt made to bring back love, justice, and reconciliation and bring back the bond. Thank you.
Oratory is alive and well at Morehouse College. These students are so talented. I'm very proud of all of them, and I appreciate your staying, and I enjoyed every last speech, and I hope you did also. Before we adjourn, I would like the judges to be allowed to retire to the Howard Thurman Meditation Room so they may begin their deliberations, and we will sing a cappella, led by Mr. Denzel Fields, our college hymn. Thank you.